What if the most advanced engineering on Earth was not created by us at all? We like to believe that modern civilization stands at the peak of human achievement. We build skyscrapers of glass and steel, tunnels through mountains, and cities that shine so brightly they can be seen from space. And yet, in some forgotten corners of the world, there are places that raise a deeply uncomfortable question. What if some of the most impressive underground structures on this planet were built long before our supposed rise to greatness? Because scattered across the Earth are tunnels, chambers, and entire underground systems that do not behave the way they should. Their walls appear too straight, their ceilings seem too flat, their scale feels too vast. In some cases, the engineering is so precise that even today it would require enormous planning, manpower, and advanced tools. And the strangest part? For some of these places, history is silent. No detailed records, no clear explanation, no consensus that truly resolves the mystery. Tonight, we are going deep underground, from Ecuador to Turkey, from Bosnia to China, to examine 4 tunnel systems that, according to many researchers and explorers, simply do not make sense. Places with polished walls, mechanical-looking marks, giant excavated volumes, and missing debris that should still be there. If these places were really made by ancient people using primitive tools, then where is the evidence of the work? And if they were not, then who built them? Let's begin with one of the most controversial underground sites ever discovered. Deep in the jungle of Ecuador lies a cave system that has fueled speculation for decades: Cueva de los Tallos. At first glance, it sounds like just another remote cave, but the deeper people looked into it, the stranger the story became. The site entered the world of mystery largely through the claims of explorer Janos Moric, who described parts of the underground system in ways that did not sound natural at all. Instead of chaotic cave passages shaped randomly by water and time, he spoke of corridors that seemed geometric, spaces with straight lines, flat surfaces, and walls that looked almost worked. That is where the conflict begins. The conventional explanation is simple. This is a natural cave system, likely formed through geological processes over immense stretches of time. On paper, that sounds reasonable, but then comes the visual problem. Because when people see images and descriptions of some of these interior spaces, many ask the same question. Why do parts of it look so unnaturally structured? Why do some passages appear almost rectangular? Why do some ceilings seem too even? And why do certain surfaces look less like raw nature and more like cut stone? This is exactly the kind of contradiction that keeps the mystery alive. Then, in 1976, the cave became the focus of a major expedition, one that attracted international attention for a very simple reason. Among those involved was Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon. And that alone transformed the story. Because once a figure like Armstrong enters the narrative, the site stops being just local folklore or fringe speculation. People start to wonder, what exactly was important enough to bring an expedition of that scale into one of the most difficult environments on Earth? Officially, the expedition did not confirm any fantastic claims. No ancient underground library, no clear evidence of a lost advanced civilization, no final revelation. And yet, for many, that only deepened the mystery. Because if the cave system is entirely natural, why do so many descriptions of it feel so mechanically precise? Why do some observers insist that the walls and corridors look shaped rather than formed? And why has the site remained a magnet for theories involving lost knowledge, hidden chambers, and forgotten history? Cueva de los Tallos sits in that dangerous space between science and suspicion. Not proven enough to rewrite history, but strange enough that people cannot stop returning to it. And once you begin asking whether nature alone can explain perfectly shaped underground spaces, the next place becomes even harder to ignore. Because in Turkey, there is a site that is not just a cave. It is an entire city beneath the earth. In the region of Cappadocia, Turkey, there is an underground city so large, so complex, and so difficult to explain in practical terms that it feels like something out of speculative fiction. Its name is Derinkuyu, and it descends deep below the surface in multiple levels. A hidden world of tunnels, chambers, storage rooms, wells, ventilation shafts, and living spaces. A place designed not for a few explorers or monks, but for survival on a massive scale. According to widely repeated estimates, this underground city may have sheltered tens of thousands of people. Think about that for a second. Not a cave, not a bunker, not a ceremonial space, a functioning subterranean city. And that immediately raises the first question. How does a society carve out something this extensive underground without leaving overwhelming evidence of the work above ground? Because Derinkuyu was not a single chamber hollowed out by chance. It was engineered. The system included sophisticated ventilation, access routes, defensive stone doors, water systems, separated living zones, storage areas, animal spaces. It was built with planning. A lot of planning. And that is exactly what makes it so difficult to reduce to a simple explanation. The mainstream historical view is that these underground cities were carved into the soft, volcanic rock of the region over long periods of time, expanded gradually as needed by ancient communities seeking refuge from invasion or persecution. Again, on paper, that sounds possible, but once you confront the scale physically, another problem appears. Where did all the removed rock go? If a site this large was excavated by human hands, then the material taken out should have existed in enormous quantities. We are not talking about a small cave extension. We are talking about a colossal underground volume carved out layer by layer beneath the surface. Tens of thousands of tons of rock would have had to be extracted, transported, and dumped somewhere. So where are the traces? Where are the ancient spoil heaps large enough to match the excavation? Where is the surrounding evidence of an operation on that scale? And even if the rock was easier to cut than solid granite, the labor remains staggering. The coordination remains staggering. The engineering remains staggering. It is one thing to say ancient people dug underground shelters. It is another to accept the existence of an 18-level subterranean complex capable of supporting an entire population with air circulation and infrastructure. Derinkuyu forces us into a strange position. We know it exists. We know it is real. We know human beings used it. But the practical story of how something this vast was carved, organized, ventilated, and sustained still leaves many people uneasy, because the city feels less like an improvised refuge and more like a system designed by minds that understood underground architecture at a very high level. And if that sounds difficult to explain, the next case is even more dangerous for the official timeline. Because in Bosnia, the mystery is not only about engineering, it is about age. In Bosnia, near the controversial site often associated with the so-called Bosnian pyramids, lies a network of underground passages known as the Ravne tunnels. From the beginning, this site has divided opinion. Supporters argue that the tunnels are part of something ancient, hidden, and potentially revolutionary. Critics insist that the claims surrounding the site are exaggerated, misinterpreted, or unscientific. And that tension is precisely why Ravne became so famous. Because this is not just a tunnel story, it is a battlefield between mainstream archaeology and alternative history. The figure most closely associated with the site is Samir Osmanagic, whose interpretation of the region triggered both fascination and backlash. To some, he is uncovering forgotten evidence. To others, he is building a myth where none exists. But whatever side one takes, one fact remains. The Ravne tunnels continue to attract people because of the anomalies reported inside them. Among the most discussed are claims about unusual air conditions, especially highly ionized air, and data or interpretations suggesting strange environmental properties within the tunnels. Now, by themselves, atmospheric anomalies do not rewrite history, but they contribute to the sense that this is not an ordinary underground space. And then comes the claim that changes everything. Radiocarbon results associated with material from the site have been used to argue for dates far older than conventional history would comfortably allow, dates of more than 30,000 years. If such interpretations were taken at face value, the implications would be explosive, because that would push at least part of the story far beyond the accepted timeline of organized monumental construction in this region. Far beyond what most people imagine when they think of ancient Europe. That is why Ravne is so powerful as a mystery, not because everyone agrees on the evidence, but because the site keeps forcing the same uncomfortable question. What if something significant is being dismissed too quickly? Even people who reject the strongest claims still have to confront the psychological force of the place. Long tunnels, blocked sections, sealed passages, a narrative filled with partial discoveries and unresolved interpretations. It is the perfect environment for suspicion to grow. And suspicion grows fastest when history seems incomplete. Because once people feel that something underground has been hidden, sealed, misdated, or ignored, they stop trusting the official explanation, even before an alternative is proven. That is the true power of the Ravne tunnels. They do not merely present evidence, they create doubt. And once doubt enters the story, the next site becomes almost impossible to forget. Because in China, there is a complex so vast, so precise, and so strangely undocumented that it may be one of the most baffling underground constructions on Earth. In China, hidden beneath the surface for centuries, lies one of the most extraordinary underground complexes ever found, the Longyou caves. These are not rough cavities, not random voids, not a single forgotten chamber. They are massive excavated halls, carved directly into solid rock, dozens of them. Enormous interior spaces with pillars, walls, ceilings, and deliberate geometry, all created with a level of consistency that immediately raises the question: who could have done this, and why? The Longyou caves are often described as one of the greatest underground mysteries in China. And when you look at the details, it is not hard to see why. There are around 24 large caverns, each cut into the rock with astonishing control. Some of the chambers are huge, cathedral-like in scale. The surfaces inside, many of them bear repeating carved patterns, almost as if the builders were not merely removing stone, but doing so according to a visual system. And then there is the precision. In some areas, the rock walls separating one hall from another are said to be remarkably thin, considering the scale of the excavation, around half a meter in places, which suggests not only ambition, but extraordinary spatial control. Think about what that means. To carve enormous underground chambers side by side, without breaking through unintentionally, without causing catastrophic collapse, and without obvious major errors, would require surveying, planning, and execution of a very high order. This is not casual labor. This is system-level engineering, and yet one of the strangest aspects of Longyou is not the caves themselves. It is the silence around them. China possesses one of the richest and most meticulous written traditions in human history. Dynastic records, engineering records, administrative texts, an enormous civilizational memory. And still, when it comes to the construction of these giant underground halls, there is no universally accepted historical account explaining who made them, for what purpose, and by what exact method. That absence is deeply unsettling, because massive projects tend to leave traces in memory, political records, cultural references, legends tied to builders or emperors, economic signs of labor and logistics, something. But here, there is a void, and that void may be even more mysterious than the caves. Some reports have also mentioned unusual low-frequency sounds or humming detected in the area, adding yet another layer to the site's reputation. Whether these are environmental, geological, or exaggerated by retelling, they fit the larger pattern perfectly. Longyou is not just visually impressive. It feels wrong in a way that history cannot comfortably explain. How do you excavate chambers of this size? How do you remove that much stone? How do you do it so precisely? And how do you leave behind almost no clear record of the operation? At some point, the mystery stops being local. It becomes global. Because now we are no longer talking about one strange cave or one misunderstood tunnel. We are looking at a pattern. By this point, the question is no longer whether one site is unusual. The question is why so many underground sites across the world seem to share the same impossible traits. Different continents, different cultures, different official explanations. And yet, the same disturbing features return again and again. Massive scale. Not a chamber, but networks. Not a shelter, but systems. Mechanical-looking precision. Walls that seem too straight. Surfaces that look worked. Layouts that imply planning, not randomness. Engineering beyond expectation. Ventilation. Water access. Structural stability. Internal organization. Historical silence or ambiguity. Either no records at all, or records too thin to match the enormity of the construction. And then perhaps the biggest mystery of all, the missing debris. Because every underground space has a physical cost. To create a tunnel, a city, or a chamber beneath the earth, material must be removed. That material does not vanish. It must be transported, stored, reused, dumped, or somehow accounted for. But in case after case, the volume of extracted rock seems wildly out of proportion to the visible evidence left behind. That does not automatically prove a lost civilization, but it does prove something else. The easy explanations are often not enough. And maybe that is what makes these underground sites so compelling. They sit at the edge of what history can explain comfortably. Not fully outside it, but not fully contained by it either. They create a pressure point, a place where official history, visual evidence, engineering logic, and human imagination all collide. Because once you accept that ancient people may have done more than we give them credit for, the world becomes larger. But once you begin to wonder whether some of these structures point to knowledge that has been lost, forgotten, or deliberately ignored, then history becomes something else entirely. It becomes incomplete. So what are we really looking at? Natural caves later modified by human hands? Ancient engineering pushed far beyond what textbooks usually emphasize? Misunderstood sites that look more mysterious than they truly are? Or fragments of a deeper past, traces of cultures, methods, and capabilities that did not survive into the official record? That is the point where these tunnels become more than archaeological curiosities. They become a challenge to the assumption that the story of civilization is clean, continuous, and well understood. Because if even one of these sites contains evidence of large-scale underground construction that cannot be properly explained by the accepted model, then the consequences are enormous. It would mean that the timeline is less secure than we think. That human capability in the ancient world may be underestimated, and that entire chapters of our past may have vanished, leaving behind only stone, buried stone, hidden stone, silent stone. And that silence may be the most unsettling part of all. These places do not speak clearly. They do not give us a neat answer. They offer fragments, shapes, absences, and contradictions. But sometimes contradictions are more powerful than proof. Because proof can close a mystery, contradictions keep it alive. And these 4 underground sites remain alive in the imagination of millions for one simple reason. No explanation feels complete. Not the natural explanation, not the historical explanation, not the alternative explanation, only the mystery itself feels solid. So now the question comes back to you. If these tunnels and underground chambers were really made by ancient people using simple tools, how did they achieve such scale, such precision, and such complexity? Why are the records missing? Where did the excavated stone go? And why do so many of these places feel less like primitive shelters and more like the ruins of a forgotten world beneath our feet? Who built them? And what else is still hidden underground? If you enjoyed this video, write your theory in the comments. Which of these 4 places do you think is the most difficult to explain? And if you want more mysteries like this, lost civilizations, impossible structures, unexplained discoveries, and the parts of history that never quite add up, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because the deeper we go, the stranger the story becomes.